everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business podcast. I'm your host, Katrin Becker. On this podcast, we interview the most amazing and interesting people because we want to learn what they've learned in their career that has made them so successful, because we can learn so much more from our failures than we can from our successes. And while a smart person learns from their mistakes, a genius learns from the mistakes of others. So let's learn about these failures so we can either avoid them completely or we can fail faster. My guest today has an incredible story, and I'm so glad to bring it to you and share it. His name is Kenneth L. Johnson, and he is the president of East Coast Executive Diversity Recruiting Firm based out of Harlem. He also has an app that's designed to help connect the right people called Black Box, and he is the organizer of TEDxHarlem. So he does a lot, and he does a lot for his community, and I'm so glad to welcome him here. So Kenneth, welcome to the show.
You know, I'm excited to be here. I know I'm in the right place because if we're going to talk about failures, I got quite a few of those on deck. So I'm in the right place here. That works for me. Interesting people that have failed. That's me. Let's go.
I mean, show me a successful person that hasn't failed.
It's the only way to be in the game. You got to play, right?
Yeah, and we learn from it.
Sure.
So I'm glad to have you here. I'm glad to talk more about diversity inclusion and how you've seen that change, because your company started right before 9/11, right? Like a week before?
Yeah, like a week before. I started my business in South Philadelphia. I literally was sitting at my dining room table. I had worked in staffing and recruiting prior for a couple of years and had some great mentors in that space, Bernard Johnson, Pat Troy, Joyce Holly, really a Mount Rushmore of staffing professionals in the Philadelphia area. And so I worked for them and then decided to join their team by setting out on my own and doing my thing. And started it September 3rd, 2001, September 11th, 2001. We had the attacks on the World Trade Center. And it was interesting. Most of my clients at the time, they were financial service clients. So we had Vanguard and we had JP Morgan, we had Wilmington Trust and PNC. So I lost all my clients on that day. So it was really interesting, but it allowed me to maybe be a little more intentional, maybe a little more mission aligned and think it through and say, hey, you know what? When we come back, let's lock in on being a diversity recruitment firm. So that's what we did. We just set out to secure companies that were committed to workplace diversity, and that's those are the people we like to be with.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think the world has just changed so much in the last 23 years, and now people talk about DEI initiatives, and it's more well known, but it probably wasn't when you first started. Maybe it was with the Fortune 500. Was it just getting started?
I think you're accurate in the fact that it wasn't talked about at all. But there were things being talked about. There were, people spoke about the hidden job market, and people spoke about inequality and things of that nature. So it might have been packaged in a different wrapping, but it was still about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Did companies have an actual director, manager, vice president, chief DEI officer? No, the companies didn't have those people, but they did have an issue, and the issue was their lack of support and their inability to identify diverse talent, especially as it relates to Black talent. And we thought, they say if you're going to start a business, focus it on solving an issue and/or a problem. Mm-hmm. And we saw that as a huge problem, and we wanted to be the solution provider.
Well, I love that. So walk me through a little bit of, how you are finding the people and how you're finding the companies and match them up. Is there any difference between how a typical recruiting firm would work?
I think so. And Katrin, this is going to sound kind of interesting and maybe a little self-promoting, right? But the way we find talent typically is to connect with talent. And the way we connect with talent is to show up in the places where said talent exists. So for us, when I show up at conferences and I show up at different places and networking events, not only am I looking for talent, but I want to know what other recruiters are there. Who else is doing third-party search is here in the building. And I'll be honest with you, I don't see them. They're not there. So I think we connect with talent a little differently because we show up. And sometimes I think it was my father that told me showing up's the biggest part of the challenge, right? So we show up, we try to add value, we try to connect, and we try to network. I don't know if I actually try to recruit, I just try to network. And typically, when you're networking genuinely, things come back in return. And that's kind of what has propelled us to the success that we've had. We've worked with some major companies out here and continue to have major clients. It's hard to believe that someone can start out at their dining room table and claim Tiffany and Company and Comcast and the JP Morgans of the world and Pepsi as clients, Fruit of the Loom, Disney. Like, we've worked with them all.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm just a guy from Uniontown, Pennsylvania, who was sitting in his kitchen in South Philadelphia, sitting in his dining room in South Philadelphia, trying to change the world. And I think every time we have a successful placement, we do our part in changing the world. And that's something that I smile about and typically have a glass of champagne to.
Well, cheers to that. And isn't it like the Steve Jobs quote of the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do?
Correct. I'd like to be included in that group. We have some work to do, but we're here. We're here. We'll be all right.
Well, let's talk about the good a little bit. Like, what good have you seen happen in this space in the last 20 years?
Yeah, so it was slow moving for a long time, right? But wins are wins. So you kind of move at the pace that the corporate world is dictating often. So some of the wins, that of course, the big wins are, when I started, I think there were four Black men that had been CEO of Fortune 500 companies, and no women, I believe at the time, no Black women at the time. So since then, we've seen, I don't know, maybe another dozen people come in and out of the ranks. So that's a positive thing. It's slow, but it's positive. I think you see more people on corporate boards. You see more people in the C-suite, people of color, and of course, our focus has been aligned a lot with Black talent, but just diversity in general. I think you're seeing more women, clearly. You're seeing more people from other underrepresented groups, whether it's LGBTQ or whatever it is, but you're seeing them have a voice that aligns with the corporate mission. And when those things happen, I just think we all win.
Yeah. And I think there's just a lot more awareness of the unconscious bias. I mean, I tend to believe, and maybe you've experienced differently, that most people are pretty good. I think most humans don't want to be awful, but they just sometimes don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, but I want to believe that most people are pretty good. Yeah, they don't know what they. So there's just a lot of misinformation. We're so siloed in kind of the approach that we take often in this particular country, and then there's just misinformation that exists about other groups of people and things of that nature. And there's some fear out there for a certain segment of people that others are taking things from them. There's room for everyone. We just want the most talented people to be seen and to be heard as far as it relates to the work we do as a recruitment firm. And we believe there was some inequality or some inequities that existed in the sourcing and talent acquisition of said groups of people. If you keep going to the same talent pool, you will keep producing the same types of people. Don't get me wrong. I'm one of the biggest proponents of a referral source, right? But typically people refer people that are a lot like them, right?
Yeah.
So let's open the door and try to maybe find some additional referral sources. And storytelling is a big piece of that. Like, you need to, as an organization, be able to tell stories of women that have had success, of Black employees that have had success, of any marginalized group. Like, you need to be able to tell stories about them there at your organization, having success and growing in their careers. So the clients that we support typically have those stories to tell, but they don't want just a story. They want an entire library of stories to tell. And we believe that if they allow us to partner with them in a genuine way, we can help support that mission and goal. And then, my son, who's 19, shout out to UKL, he can actually go into a company and honestly believe that he's getting a legitimate and sincere look. So that's all we want.
That's really, I love to see everyone to get a fair shot and to be themselves and to get a chance to really shine. So I love
Sure.
that you're giving people the opportunity to have the spotlight on them.
You know, I want to commend you for sharing your spotlight. Like, we need you. We need allies like you that say, "Hey, Kenneth, I love what you're doing. Why don't you come on my podcast and let's talk about it a little?" So thank you so very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh gosh, absolutely. I mean, amazing people are amazing people, period.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because earlier today I was thinking, all right, who's amazing? So as you had mentioned, I'm the organizer of TEDxHarlem.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to shine the spotlight on individuals and amplify their voices. And one of our requirements is that all of our speakers actually reside in the village of Harlem, like they reside here. So that just allows us to not only have everyday people that we see on the subway and we see them at the store and we see them at, I don't know, the Victoria, you know, wherever we're at, we see these people, and now we can position them and place them on the stage where they can share their story, but also have a call to action that allows others to galvanize around kind of what they're speaking about. But most importantly, when I see some of the children running up and down the street, they can actually one day look and say, "Oh, that's the guy that lives next door. I didn't know he worked for XYZ company and this is what he does," or that he has a patent on this. Our speakers have been so amazing that I just think that often they walk around and they don't even understand how incredible their accomplishments are. They really have some great stories. So if we put ourselves in a position through TEDxHarlem to allow them to not only tell their stories to Harlem, but to tell their stories to the world, whew, that's it
a
right
win.
there.
That's a
Yeah, that's
win.
it right there.
Well, there's something interesting about like human psychology of how people, most people, of course, there's the trailblazers and the pioneers, this doesn't apply to them. But for most people, unless they've seen someone else do it, they lack the belief that they can do it themselves.
Yeah, you know, belief and opportunity, right? So I started this our segment out speaking about the people in Philadelphia that helped me believe that I could have my own firm, that I could set my shingle out and do what I do. But had I not seen them not only being open to the conversations with me just about doing recruiting, but allowing me an opportunity to go to meetings with them and to grow with them as they were growing their businesses and to laugh about the failures, right? But to learn the lessons from them as well. I worked with some very, very interesting people, but all of them gave me an opportunity to do this work. And you know, I think I haven't spoke. Well, I speak to Bernard Johnson pretty frequently. Same last name, no relation, but he's the one that taught me executive search. And I'm almost embarrassed at the times that he says, "Hey, I really think you're doing a great job," right? Because he's the one that opened this door and allowed me to learn this business and grow and put an eye on something that was achievable.
Hmm. Well, we got to talk about the bad and the ugly.
Yes.
Part of life. We don't hide from our emotions, even though sometimes they're uncomfortable. But you mentioned a few minutes ago about the misconceptions that are out there. And a lot of it comes from scarcity mindset of that there's not enough jobs. So if someone of color is being given this job, which I think is probably a huge misconception that they haven't earned it or qualified for it, that's where some of the ugliness comes out that people are capable of. What are the kind of the things that you've seen kind of in that realm, and how is it changing?
Wow. Loaded question. Good question. You know, it's interesting. So I was telling this story the other day. So this is going to be kind of a recruiting 101 conversation, right? So when we first started East Coast Executives, we were a contingency search firm. And what that means is that companies would give us a position description, and they say, hey, if you find somebody for that job, great, we'll pay you in 60, 90 days after they start. And we'd run around and call around the world and try to identify people. Let's just say it was an accountant. And this is before LinkedIn and all of this, right? This is like when you're literally speaking to people. You're in phone books. For those of you, there used to be this thing called a phone book and people's numbers ringing. So we're really working hard. And then we would send these resumes over, and sometimes we'd have couriers take them over, we'd fax them over. All of this is putting you in the time frame that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then the company would get back to us maybe in a week or two and say, oh, we just moved Joe over from marketing. He's going to do the role now. He just got his degree in accounting. And we're like, hey, we've been working on this for 3 weeks, although we had an arrangement and a signed agreement, it was contingent upon, a lot of different things. So when we switched to a retained search model, which meant companies had to partner with us, like they had some skin in the game as well. So they give us a position description, and then there's an arrangement where they kind of put a deposit up front on the search, and it allows us to know that they're going to be connected and committed. When I call them, they're going to return my call because they've already paid me some money, right? And then it just gives us the opportunity to not look out of the loop. It's not a good feeling when you recruit a candidate. So I recruit you, and then I have to come back to you and say, hey, they already filled the job. Well, Ken, you just spoke to me 3 days ago. What do you mean? Why didn't you know this? And it's like, well, we hadn't been communicating with them. So the bad in it is that when we thought we had something that people valued and wanted, people and companies had all shared, the companies through their mission statements, they shared that they were equal opportunity employers and things of that nature. The people shared that they wanted to improve their department and make it more like the end user and their customers by representing a diverse workforce. They would tell us all of that, but then when we picked up the phones and started making our sales calls, first quarter, people didn't want to work with us in that way. So we want people, we want workplace diversity, but all we got was no's. When we went to a retained search model and we just start positioning ourselves better, then people started coming to us. But those were the people that really were committed to having change and making a difference.
And not just lip service.
Yeah, it wasn't just lip service. They were coming to us with intention. And I think that that changed it all. I always say this, the reason people come to us, there's kind of two things that have stood out over the past 20 plus years. Somebody got in trouble because they did something and a lawsuit was coming or pending or possible. So they call us and say, hey, we want to be more genuine in our recruitment efforts and add some diversity to the talent pipeline, right? So there's that. Or someone gets up out of their office and they walk to the break room, and as they're looking through the corridor and through the glass windows, they understand that everyone looks exactly like them. And when they get back and sit down, I've literally had people say they came back and sat down and Googled diversity recruiter, and that's how they found me. And they called me, but they said they literally just took a walk to the break room and looked around and said, oh, what did we do? Like, what did we do? Now, we take all calls and we have great conversations. Some companies aren't ready because there's other things you have to do. Some environments can be toxic. You spoke about microaggressions and things of that nature. No one's asking for gifts. We want you to hire talented people. And we believe we work with some of the most talented people in the world, but you have to provide an environment where they feel safe and they can grow and they feel valued and wanted, and a lot of places aren't there yet. So there's work to be done, but I think we're moving in the right direction in most places.
That's so good to hear. I mean, obviously I can never understand what it's like to be Black, but I can be empathetic as being a woman in engineering. There's many times where I was the only one. And so
Sure.
I can relate to not always feeling safe to speak up.
Yeah, we're having some conversations. We've had conversations. I guess it was last year. So Black Enterprise Magazine, they do this thing called BM Excel, Black Men Excel. And I did a workshop there. I guess that must have been 2023 or 2022. I can't remember which one. But I did a workshop. They had me do a workshop on emotional intelligence. And, so we spoke a lot about empathy and storytelling and things of that nature. But I think it's becoming more and more important in the workplace that people just kind of understand and have empathy for women, for people of color, for people from underrepresented groups, for their own employees in general, just understand. And I think, a piece of that, the pandemic did some of that for us, right? There was the George Floyd, the pandemic, all of that stuff kind of thrust some emotions out into the public space. And people at the time had an opportunity to just sit down and say, oh, something's wrong here. I didn't, you had to just start looking at your own situation, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and through that, the good in that was that our phones rang off the hook. Like, we got inquiries all the time. Some people were ready to work with us and some people weren't, but the interest was there and that was important for us. So it caused some companies to start adding DEI roles and positions and things of that nature. But, as a recruiter and as someone that's been in the space for quite some time, I'm an internal optimist, but I knew that was going to be short-lived. I knew that we're going to take a couple steps and then the companies might take a couple back, but hopefully we're further ahead than we were in 2019, right?
Yeah.
So you see some of that. I think diversity, equity, and inclusion positions on Indeed are down over 120%, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yes,
Oh my
very
gosh.
serious. Since the height of the
Yeah.
pandemic and George Floyd, a lot of my friends have lost their roles as directors of DEI or DNI, whatever it is. A lot of those positions have been eliminated, and I'm not going to say I didn't see it coming. I think it happened a little faster than I thought it would, but yeah, I think we knew the window was going to be a short window and would be closed. But I think through that, some other positive things have happened, and I just think it's an awareness.
So wrapping up, I mean, this was a lot that we covered and a lot for people to ingest. And, I hope all the listeners are coming in with open minds. That's something that I love to promote, and just, this is a learning opportunity for all of us to come listen with an open mind. What is something that a white person should know about the experience, or how can we help to be allies?
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Wanting to be an ally, wanting to listen. I think sometimes as people, we want to defend our position without hearing the other person's experience. And I just think if people would just listen and not get offended by what typically is the truth, it would go a long way towards having conversations that really mean something and can spark some other conversations and some actions around how we do things. I'm part of I'm part of this Black Communities Council with CEO Action, right? And we literally get on these calls and just talk about ways that we can kind of make things better. And a big part of that, like, these are representatives from some of the world's largest companies, but a big part of that is taking the information we have, taking it back to employee resource groups and business resource groups at our companies, and sparking the conversation, not just in February for Black History Month, but all year long, right?
Yeah.
Let's start having genuine conversations about equity. People aren't asking for anything. People are just asking for equality in the way things are doled out. And if we can start having some of those conversations more consistently, I think we'll be all right. So that takes people that aren't Black or to just kind of listen and hear it out. And I know there's a lot of trauma in that experience, right? But what's on the other side of trauma, right? And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're on the other side of trauma, I hope.
Oh, I love that. I think, you know, people can be intolerant, and you can never get to understanding if you live in intolerance. And it's when we get to understanding that we can get to forgiveness, and we can forgive
Yes.
ourselves, and we can forgive others. And, you know, I love to work with people who want to work with themselves, because I believe that to change the world, you have to go in first and work on your
Sure.
inner work. And then that reflects into your outer world. So I hope more people can do those things, and really, really focus in on what makes all of us beautiful and unique, and love those pieces of us.
Yeah, it's that's the puzzle, right? Those pieces make up the puzzle, and when you put the puzzle together, it's typically a really beautiful thing, right?
Yeah,
So we have the pieces. We just need to work to put them together, and I think once we do that, some beautiful things will happen, and some advancements will happen, and people will start feeling better. And then if you just combine all of that stuff together, uh, you just have a better place to live, and that's all we all want.
I agree. I agree. Kenneth, thank you so much for being a guest on here. I've truly enjoyed our time together.
It's been a pleasure. I want to thank you and your loyal listeners. I'm sure you're amazing. I want to throw that in. So I really enjoyed this experience. Thank you so very much for just tapping me and saying, "Hey, let's have a conversation." Because you're helping. You were asking, "What can people do?" This is helping. Trust me, it's helping me. I know that for sure. Let me tell you what I do. So every day, every day. So I'm a recruiter. I have conversations all day. This is what I do all day. Every day I pick a person and I say, that's the most interesting person I've met today. You
Oh,
won. You're the winner. You're the
oh,
winner. No doubt in my mind, you're the winner. No
oh,
doubt.
thank you, Kenneth. I feel so seen.
I have two more calls, but I'm pretty sure they're going to have to do something amazing to beat you out. So I think we're going to
You'll
be
have to
good.
text me and be like, you're still the champ.
You need to get your information. Yes, send me an email. I will text you. I told you I have two more calls today. But after that, I'll know the winner, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be you. No offense to everyone else I spoke to today. We won't share the date of this interview because I might make
Exactly.
some people
Exactly. No one will know.
mad.
Well, Ken, please tell the people how they can reach out to you, whether they're looking to be connected with the company, whether they're a company looking to increase their diversity.
Yeah, there's a couple ways you can do it. Listen, you can just come to Harlem and ask them about the guy that's waving the flag for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can do that. Or the easier thing might be to visit eastcoastexecutives.com and tap in there. Our website is pretty much a place where we talk about a lot of the things that we have going on, job opportunities. There's a blog there. Our social media feeds are tied into that. So that's a good place. But I'm on LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn, so I'm always there. I'm always accepting invites. I'm always connecting and talking to people. Needless to say, I love to do it. So I'm open to all connection requests. Please tap in.
Yes, and I must say you're great on LinkedIn. So everyone should
Thank you.
definitely connect with you on there.
I appreciate it. I really do.
Well, and to the listeners, thank you so much for being here. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. I know Kenneth and I had a blast making it, even though we're talking about some hard subjects sometimes, because, you know, we can talk about the hard things and still have fun doing it. So until next time, everyone, take care.